No, oh yes, replied Brown, looking at the paper. 14 Tanner's Court. Then why are we waiting here? Cried Rupert impatiently. The clue is in our hands. Let's go along. Basil, give me your revolver. Basil was still sitting with his eyes closed. It was some time before he answered. I don't think you will need it. Perhaps not, said Rupert, putting on his coat. One never knows. But don't forget that we are going to see criminals. Do you think they are criminals? Asked Basil in his sleepy voice. Rupert laughed loudly. Can you doubt, my dear brother, that the letter is an order to attack and kill the Major? Look at the letter. I am looking at the letter, said Basil calmly. I don't think it is the sort of letter one criminal would write to another. Well, cried Rupert, turning round, with laughter in his bright blue eyes, your methods surprise me. Why, there is the letter. It is written, and it does give orders for a crime. And I am going anyhow, and I know that I am going to a criminal. Can I have your revolver? Certainly, said Basil, getting up, but I am coming with you. And the three men went out into the quiet night. It was a funny-looking group. The short figure of the Major was marching behind the flying coat of young Rupert Grant. Basil was slowly walking behind the Major, with his face turned to the stars. It took them only a few minutes to get to Tanner's Court. Shall we go in now? Asked Rupert. We should call the police first, said the Major. I shouldn't call the police, said Basil. Rupert turned away from him angrily. We must open the door, he said, and rush in. If the criminals try to escape, I shall use my revolver. Basil, have your stick ready. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4. With these words he threw the door open, and the three men rushed into the room and stopped dead. They were in an ordinary and well-furnished office. Behind a large desk, a small man with a black moustache was writing hard. He looked up at the three men and asked very politely, Did you knock? I am sorry I did not hear. What can I do for you? There was a pause, and then the Major stepped forward. The letter was in his hand, and he looked very grim. Is your name P.G. Northover? That's my name, replied the other with a friendly smile. I think this letter was written by you, said Major Brown angrily. He threw the letter to the man at the desk. Northover looked at it with interest and smiled again. Well, sir, went on the Major, breathing hard, what about that? What about it? Said Northover. I don't quite understand you, sir. I am Major Brown, said that gentleman grimly. Northover stood up and bowed. Pleased to meet you, sir. What have you to say to me? Say, cried the Major impatiently. I want to settle this affair. I want— Certainly, said Northover, jumping up from his chair. Please sit down. Will you take a chair for a moment? He pressed an electric bell, and the next moment a young man entered the room. Mr. Hobson, said Northover, this is Major Brown. Will you please finish that thing for him I gave you this morning, and bring it in? Yes, sir, said Mr. Hobson, and disappeared at once. You will excuse me, gentlemen, said Mr. Northover with his bright smile, if I continue to work until Mr. Hobson is ready. I have some work that must be finished before I get away on my holiday tomorrow. And we all like the open air of the country, don't we? Ha ha! The criminal took up his pen with a happy laugh. A few minutes passed. Mr. Northover wrote busily while the three gentlemen looked at him in grim silence. At last Mr. Hobson appeared again, put a paper before Mr. Northover, and disappeared again. Mr. Northover ran his eye up and down the paper and then handed it to Major Brown. "I think you will find it all right, Major," he said politely. The Major looked at it and saw that it was a bill addressed to him. It ran as follows: Major Brown to P.G. Northover. Planting and arrangement of 200 pansies in garden. Barrow with flowers. Hire of man with barrow. Hire of house and garden for 1 day. Furniture for house. Salary of Miss Jameson. Salary of gardener. The total of £10. "What?" cried Brown after a dead silence. His eyes seemed slowly rising out of his head. "What, for heaven's sake, is this?" "What is it?" repeated Northover with his friendly smile. "It is your bill, of course." "My bill?" cried the Major. "My bill? And what have I to do with that bill?" "Well," said Northover, laughing, "I think you will have to pay it." For once the Major forgot his good manners. He lifted the nearest chair into the air with one hand and threw it at Northover's head. Northover jumped to his feet and got a blow on the arm. "You are mad," cried Northover. "A client has a full right to protest against overcharges, but not to throw furniture." "What, for heaven's sake, do you mean by your clients and overcharges?" cried Major Brown, almost hysterically, for the first time in his life. "Who are you? I have never seen you, or your foolish bills. I only know that you ordered one of your criminals to kill me." "Mad," said Northover, looking around. "Your crimes are discovered," said Rupert. "I am only a private detective, but a policeman is coming here, and—" "Mad," repeated Northover. "All of them are mad." At this moment the sleepy voice of Basil Grant was heard. "Major Brown," he said, "can you tell me what was the name of the man who lived in your house before you?" The unhappy Major thought for a moment and said, "Yes, I think I know. A man named Gurney Brown. That was his name." "And when did you take the house?" asked Basil, and for the first time his eyes lost their dreaminess. "I came in last month," said the Major. At these words the criminal, Northover, suddenly fell into his chair and shouted with laughter. "Oh, it is too funny!" he cried. "It is too funny!" Basil Grant was shaking with noiseless laughter. "Look here, Basil," cried Rupert angrily. "If you don't want me to go mad, tell me what all this means." Northover rose from his chair. "Let me explain, sir," he said. "And first of all I must apologize to you, Major Brown, for a most unfortunate mistake, which has caused you much trouble. You behaved like a real gentleman. Of course the bill is not yours, and you need not trouble about it." He tore the bill into small pieces and threw them into the waste-paper basket. "But I don't even begin to understand," exclaimed the Major. "What bill? What mistake?" Mr. Northover came up to Major Brown. "Do you know where you are, Major?" "God knows I don't," nervously answered the Major. "You are standing," replied Northover, "in the office of the Adventure and Romance Agency." "And what is that?" asked Brown. The man of business looked at him thoughtfully. "Major," he said, "did you ever feel on some dull afternoon the hunger for something unusual? Did you ever want something to happen, something that would take you away from the monotony of life, away from its dull routine? Did you ever feel that?" "Certainly not," said the Major shortly. "Then I must explain it better," said Northover with a sigh. "I am the owner of the Adventure and Romance Agency. I started the business to meet the desire of people for adventure. On every side, in conversations, in literature, we hear of the desire for the unusual, for something that would break the routine of the quiet, dull life we live. Now, the person who feels this way pays a certain sum to the Adventure and Romance Agency. In return, the agency surrounds him with the most surprising events, which break the monotony of his life. As soon as a man leaves his front door, unusual things begin to happen to him. Of course, a very interesting story is first written for him by one of the talented writers who work for the agency. Your story, Major Brown, was extremely interesting and dramatic. What a pity you did not see the end of it." A smile again appeared on his face. "Mr. Gurney Brown, who formerly lived in your present house, was my client," Northover went on, "and my foolish clerks decided that Major Brown and Mr. Gurney Brown were the same person. That's how you found yourself in the middle of another man's story. And we believe that we are doing a noble work," continued Northover with real enthusiasm. "Look at the modern man. His life is terribly dull. If he wants something different, he has to sit and read. If he wishes to get into fairyland, he has to read a book. If he wishes to be in the thick of battle, he reads a book. If he wishes to have adventures, he has to read a book. But our agency gives him real adventures in which he takes part himself. We give him the chance to be a hero. We make him fight strange men, run down long streets from pursuers, climb walls, and jump off into mysterious places. All healthy and pleasant exercises, too. We give him back his childhood, that happy time when he can act stories and be a hero. Of course," Major Brown began after a pause, "no doubt at all the scheme is excellent, but I don't think you will find me in it. When one has been oneself in the thick of real battle and seen real blood and heard real men screaming, one does not want false excitements. One wants a little house and a quiet life. So I don't think I can offer my card to any of you gentlemen?" asked Northover after another pause. "Oh, I shall take your card with the greatest pleasure," said the Major, and everybody laughed. Northover handed the Major his card, and Brown read it aloud. It ran as follows: P.J. Northover, Adventure and Romance Agency, 14 Tanner's Court. When the three men had left the office, Northover broke again into loud laughter. To think of that prosaic Major of all people getting into the nets of the Adventure and Romance Agency. At the moment a knock came at the door, and the Major re-entered the office. "What, back again, Major?" cried Northover in surprise. "What can I do for you?" "It is absurd, of course," said the Major, "but I feel a great desire to know who was the lady whom I tried to save." "Oh, certainly, Major," said Northover politely. "It was Miss Jameson. She is an actress and works for our agency." "And could I know the end of it all?" asked the Major again. The end of it all? Repeated Northover. Yes, said the Major. What did it mean? Jackals and death to Major Brown. Northover's face was very serious, though his eyes were laughing. I am terribly sorry, he said, but what you ask is impossible. The adventures are confidential. I have no right to tell you a word more. I do hope you understand. There is no one who understands discipline better than I do. Thank you very much. Good night. And the little man disappeared for the last time. Major Brown married Miss Jameson, the lady with the graceful figure and the red hair. Her friends, who knew her as a poetic creature, were surprised at her marriage with that prosaic old soldier. She always replied very quietly that she had met many men who acted very well in the dramas prepared for them by Northover's writers. But she had met in her life only one man who went down into a coal cellar when he really thought that there was a murderer there. They are living as happily as birds, and the disciplined veteran never asks his wife about the end of that story, and why he was not allowed to speak of jackals.